Professionals in strategy and operations operate under the assumption that their daily decisions are inherently logical. However, even in elite corporate environments, reasoning often defaults to implicit patterns and mental shortcuts that struggle to scale as complexity increases. Catastrophic supply chain failures rarely result from a lack of raw data. They happen when operational plans are executed based on unchallenged hidden assumptions. To counteract this, management consultants and organizations like APICS and ASCM, the global authorities on supply chain standards, utilize the Paul Elder critical thinking framework. Operating within these complex business environments requires an engineered, disciplined process of thought. This text slide defines critical thinking as disciplined thought that improves itself by making logic explicit and testing it against universal standards. This framework relies on metacognition. Instead of focusing immediately on the final decision, metacognition involves analyzing and improving the actual formation of the decision. This formal structural approach is distinct from the general concept of being critical or skeptical of an idea. The matrix forces implicit assumptions out into the open, laying them out linearly so they can be subjected to stress testing. Exposing the internal mechanics of a decision allows for the same level of optimization usually reserved for physical logistics. The Paul Elder framework identifies exactly 8 structural elements present in every forecast, supply chain plan, or financial analysis. This grid maps the complete taxonomy of these elements. Analysts typically over-index on information and interpretation, gathering data without validating the surrounding logic of the problem. Robust planning requires defining the purpose and concepts first, establishing the exact theoretical models. But the most critical element is the question at issue. If undefined, no analysis can correct the project's trajectory. Taking variables for granted introduces invisible risk into the supply chain ecosystem. These are the assumptions, and they must be isolated and verified. Finalizing a strategy without mapping the implications or considering the point of view, such as the conflicting priorities of finance and operations, leads to operational friction during execution. Missing even one of these 8 elements creates a structural weakness in the final decision. These elements are present in your logic whether or not they are formally acknowledged. Identifying these components transforms a vague business problem into a deconstructed engineering task. This 2-column matrix lists the universal intellectual standards. These serve as the quality control testing mechanism for the 8 elements of thought. These standards translate abstract thought into verifiable test questions, such as asking if a claim is true to test for accuracy. Testing for accuracy and precision acts as a firewall for the data inputs entering a supply chain model, ensuring numbers are correct and specific. Relevance and depth filter out statistical noise, keeping the analysis anchored to the core question at issue. Breadth and fairness force the decision-maker to weigh competing departmental perspectives to avoid siloed conclusions. Logic serves as the final diagnostic test to confirm whether the proposed conclusions follow from the verified facts. These standards prevent the tendency to jump to a solution by requiring every cognitive element to pass a diagnostic test before action is authorized. To apply this to high-stakes S&OP scenarios, consider the reaction to excess inventory. S&OP aligns demand, supply, and financial goals. The typical reaction in boardrooms is to declare inventory is too high and order blanket stock cuts. This reactive logic often damages service levels by cutting the wrong SKUs at the wrong time. This flowchart contrasts that implicit thinking with the Paul Elder framework. Using the framework, the purpose is to improve cash without hurting service, which reframes the question to, where exactly is the excess and why? Answering that question requires specific inputs, like SKU-level turns and an ABC analysis to categorize inventory by financial impact. If forecasting assumptions are not challenged, they can lead to negative OTIF impacts. OTIF is a supply chain metric measuring whether a customer receives the right products in full on time. Incorporating the points of view of finance and operations prevents optimizing one metric at the expense of another. The framework produces targeted action, which avoids the collateral damage caused by an unrefined cut stock mandate. This mapping protects critical service metrics while still achieving the financial mandate of the business. Critical thinking in operations replaces destructive broad strokes with surgical precision. This graphic highlights a common misconception in strategy, the idea that more data inherently results in better thinking. Feeding massive datasets into an incorrectly defined question at issue merely accelerates organizational failure. Without a deliberate map, reasoning remains implicit and unverified. This framework functions as a MISI discipline. MISI stands for mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive, a principle used to organize information so that no categories overlap and no data is left out. In environments saturated with data, structural logic determines whether those datasets result in actionable insights or institutional noise. This checklist condenses the framework into a practical 4-point protocol for daily use in planning forums. Before contributing to a decision, verify the real question and isolate your personal assumptions. You can mitigate risk by anticipating another function's viewpoint and calculating the consequences of being wrong before a plan is executed. Use this 4-question checklist as an internal filter before accepting any presented conclusion from colleagues or software. This typography displays the foundational rule. Always clarify the true question at issue before attempting to solve anything. Adopting this structural discipline integrates the rigors of engineering into the daily practice of management.